very good afternoon, everybody, and welcome along to the July edition of the Landlord Lens. This is the collaboration between Property Tribes, of which I am the co-founder and also a landlord of some 18 years, and the NRLA. And the format is that myself and Ben Beadle, who is the CEO of the NRLA, we discuss the trending topics that have come up on Property Tribes over the last week or so prior to the broadcast. And Ben, you know, trending topics, they're changing all the time. And this is what makes them so relevant to our broadcast, because we literally are discussing the hot topics.
Exactly right. You know, we're in an industry where there's so much that's thrown at us. We had a bill laid for the planning bill yesterday. We've got John Lewis that's building 10,000 homes. There's, it's all go, and it's nice not to be talking about the eviction ban for once. I'm personally delighted and sick and tired of talking about the eviction ban. So yeah, it's really good to get onto some more interesting topics.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we've said this before, the landlord community is typically quite hard to engage. So when we get a trending topic on Property Tribes, it goes into a special curated silo. We have a little algorithm in the background that looks at how many people are viewing a topic, how many people are commenting, how many people are liking, and it sorts them in that order. So when we come to the Landlord Lens every month, I look in the trending topic silo, and I come up with the top trending topics to discuss with Ben. And Ben, actually, I think what I'm about to start off with may end up being a trending topic because it's only appeared on Property Tribes this morning, so it's very, very hot off the press. And an eagle-eyed member of Property Tribes has discovered on a government tendering website that the government is actually looking for a partner with a view to exploring the merits of a national landlord register. So kind of breaking news here, and I'm just wondering if you've had an inkling of this in the pipeline.
Yeah, so we've had the first of our round tables with the Minister Eddie Hughes, and this is the white paper round tables, of which there are going to be millions of them, as I understand it. So we had our first kick-off meeting where Eddie set out from the Queen's speech what they're going to be looking at, and it's all of the stuff that we know about from the 2019 Queen's speech. But he did tell us that they are looking at a landlord register, and this tender exercise is not a surprise to us. I think what I said to the minister at the time is, by all means, crack on and do a landlord register if that's what you want, but what you're trying to achieve. And I think we know that landlord redress is going to happen. We know there are some other things that are going to happen. I don't personally see the point of carving out a brand new project for a landlord register when lots of other data points will tell you what you need to know already. So it's really important to me that whatever this looks like, that it's done, if it is to be done, it's done in a way that is not prohibitively expensive. I don't want to another licensing scam. It is a scam. I don't want it to be that sort of costly thing. But as a landlord myself, I've got nothing to hide. People know where they can find me, mostly in front of this bloody laptop at the moment. But so yeah, look, I don't think landlords have anything to fear by it. I've seen the tender. It's going to be some way off, and it is just sort of an early procurement exercise. But it very much in the offing, I think.
Well, as always, Ben, the devil will be in the detail, and if they are going to introduce such a register of landlords, they're going to have some sort of enforcement in place behind it, because as we all know, the rogue and the criminal landlords just fly under the radar and unfortunately seem to get away with it a lot of the time. So sounds great in theory, but as ever, the practical application will probably need quite a bit of detail, and definitely some way of policing it and enforcing it if landlords do not register.
Absolutely agree with that, and listeners may well have seen the release that we had out over the weekend that was highlighting this very point of 168 pieces of legislation and laws that exist out there. We are not an industry that is under-regulated. We are an industry that's under-enforced. So have 200 if you want, but the fact of the matter is that's not going to solve some of the really difficult issues that we have in the private rented sector that frankly irritate the hell out of landlords as much as tenants.
Well, I wanted to actually compliment you for that list of the 168 government statutes and regulations, because to the best of my knowledge, it's never all been curated in one place before. And that's a question that comes up quite often on Property Tribes, is where can I find this whole list of regulations? So bravo to the NRLA and the researcher behind it who has actually put it all in one place. And it's really interesting to read it because some of the laws are so antiquated and they're still in effect.
It just shows you what we're dealing with, really, that the people will argue rightly that the sector has a lot has a lot of regulation. I think this document bears it out. But the big piece that underpins effective regulation is proper enforcement, and that's really the key that's missing from some of this stuff. And the other piece that we're actually going to go on and do is to give it a little bit of context against the social sector as well, and other types of housing sectors, because I think it's important to give context, isn't it? Is that 168 a lot in the grand scheme of things or not? But what it does highlight, as you rightly observe, Vanessa, is that we're underpinned by legislation that's 200-300 years old, and I can't think in a modern private rented sector that's a good place to be. I would have thought that a few things have changed over that period.
I was just going to say, actually, Ben, before we jump onto the first trending topic, it's actually a really interesting time to be having the Landlord Lens. And by the way, everybody watching, thank you for joining us. And we do want to encourage you to interact with us on this webinar. So please do use the chat system, the chat box, if you would like to ask a question or you've got a comment on what's been said. So, we really do welcome your participation. So don't be shy, do jump in. And Ben, I was just going to say, we heard yesterday that restrictions are basically being eased on the 19th of July. There's personal responsibility. If you choose to carry on with some of them, that's your choice. And there's already media commentary starting to appear that this may spark a lot of tenant mobility, and we'll see tenants who've reviewed their living situation during lockdown and reprioritise things in their lives and the way they want to live. And we might see a lot of tenant movement over the coming months. Obviously, furlough easing out as well now. People will be starting to find out whether they have a job or not. People may be starting to go back into the office because it's no longer a requirement to work from home. Just wondered what your thoughts were on that. Will we see a return to some form of normality in the coming months, or is COVID going to continue to colour the activity within our sector?
I think it's inevitable. It's going to still be there because the projections are for quite a lot of cases on a daily basis, aren't they, as these things lift? So I do think that people, I think I'm going to be cautious. Whether or not I represent the majority remains to be seen. But I do think, I do think there will be some things that maybe hold people back a little bit. But people are desperate to get back to normal, aren't they? And I do think the sector has been busy over the summer, or apparently it's summer out there. I can't tell at the moment. I think it certainly has been warming up very nicely, and I think that this is hopefully that kind of light at the end of the tunnel that people have been looking forward to, and I expect actually that people, if they have put any plans on hold, that they might be revisiting them, particularly as holidays are still slightly awkward, aren't they? People may well be choosing to move and that sort of thing, rather than thinking about holiday time. So I think it's good for everybody, and I think the private rented sector will be no exception to that.
I think we have to consider that there are going to be changing tenant priorities as a result of COVID. And I think also that we should look to the sales market to see what's driving that, because people wanting to buy their own home have similar desires to somebody that's looking to rent. So I think that landlords going forward should really think about future-proofing any of their upcoming acquisitions based on these changing tenant priorities. And my research is showing that the number one thing that people are seeking is outdoor space or access to outdoor space. So detached and semi-detached and terrace houses with gardens are proving exceedingly popular and achieving higher sales and possibly rental prices as well. And also somewhere to work from home, a quiet area, maybe a box room, but it could be, some landlords, I think it's very clever of them, some landlords are talking about putting a home office in a garden, because it obviously adds the capital value of the property, it will add to the desirability to rent, and it kind of future-proofs that property. So we've got to think about access to outdoor space, home office, and obviously I think the other thing is it's got, you've got to have super fast broadband. You've got so many people in the house now, and people working from home, that trend may continue in some kind of hybrid format. So are you looking or seeing any trends yourself about what tenants are going to be looking for post COVID and post lockdown?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that is consistent, and I think if you've been locked away in a flat for a few months, you will be very much valuing at least a balcony, frankly. So I think there's a lot that we can learn as investors about. Actually, not just because of COVID. Yes, we get changing habits all of the time, but I think there'll be some things here that stick with us for the longer term. But if you look at tenant demand for flats dropping, but you also think about some of the issues that flats bring, cladding, weird leasehold and service charges and all of that sort of thing. Actually, I think there will be a lot of people, and in my family, we've just bought some 2-bedroom houses, not me personally, but my mother, and that's the rationale. Green space, lots of nice private garden. The home office is something also that's being considered as well. But frankly, this is no different to the type of, I know I say it's no different. The tenants will change demands, and as investors, we have to. We have to adapt, and we have to change our strategies all of the time, and we have to be really, really nimble. And I think when you add in things like cladding and leasehold, you think, crikey, why have I still got some flats? Very much looking at houses as being an option. I think a lot of investors will do.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that some of these mini trends that we've seen, such as people leaving city centres and so on, I think in the next few months we'll be able to see if they're actually becoming more permanent trends. Like there is already some commentary in the media that people are returning to the big city. People miss, city life and all that it has to offer, particularly younger people. So again, very interesting times ahead for landlords as all of this starts to unravel and we see the true economic status of the country, particularly I think furlough ending is some landlords may be getting communications from their tenants saying, actually I can't pay the rent this month, no more furlough and I've lost my job. So yeah, it's times like this that we need to work together and come up with solutions and try and advise, I think, because we talk about tenants living in isolation in one-bed flats and not have seen anybody for a year, but actually landlords can often work in isolation, can't they? And I think this is one of the good things about the NRLA and property tribes as well, that, you know, there's somewhere to come where there's a group of like-minded people doing the same thing as you and can help you find solutions.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Vanessa. And in fact, one of the meetings I've had this morning is looking at our regional network. So we've got 24, 25 colleagues across England and Wales. You know, we do a lot of work, obviously, as you know, at a national level. But what matters to a lot of landlords is, you know, well, what's happening to licensing in Nottingham or wherever it happens to be. And I think that the regional network that the NRLA has, there's something there for everybody, and I think that is a really, really good way of you know, keeping in touch with what's going on in your area. And obviously, if you've got properties in different areas, we've got different tailored meetings. So if anyone's interested in looking at those, you'll see them on the events section of our site. But a really, really good way to keep up to date, both nationally and locally.
And will you be going back to physical in-person meetings, or are you going to remain on online meetings for the time being?
Yeah, well, that's exactly what we were talking about, and I think we're taking a slightly more cautious approach to life, and we will probably have some test events in the autumn and kind of see what the appetite is. But given that, you know, we're still uncertain around how things are going to pan out even in the winter, and when if people do go on holiday and have to isolate and all of that sort of stuff, I think we're getting a lot of engagement, as I know you guys are, on you know, across this forum. We've got a couple of hundred people dialed in today, which is great. No, I get it's not the same as in person, but you can get the same sort of information, perhaps with maybe not quite as much interaction, which is why we want you to put comments in the chat box to talk to us. We don't want to be talking to ourselves. So yeah, we're going to be looking at it for much later in the year and see how things pan out. And you know, my colleagues won't be going back to the office until I've come back from holiday in September. We'll take a view then and see how things have panned out. So that's our sort of short-term plan, at least. Sort of suck it and see.
Okay, well, let's go to one of our top trending topics of the last couple of weeks. And it's interesting because in a way this one is kind of going back to basics, and it's basically a thread saying how compounding is a miracle. And I think sometimes if we're feeling a little bit wobbly about being invested in buy-to-let, it can really help to go back to the fundamentals and just remind ourselves of some of the many, many benefits of investing in buy-to-let. And one of them is compounding. And Einstein described it as the eighth wonder of the world, and quite rightly so, because basically the money that money makes money, and the money that money makes even more money. And obviously, if you've got a property that's enjoying some capital growth, even if it's only 3 to 5% per annum, with, you know, combining that with leverage, you really are getting some very inviting and attractive returns through the power of compounding. Do you ever think of your portfolio like this, Ben?
Well, I mean, do you know what? I didn't, but that's basically how I've you know, like a lot of landlords have managed to build a portfolio. You know, things go up and you keep going, and then, you know, you try to work out what your exit strategy is. So yeah, no, I think it is worthwhile going back to basics, and I think that, you know, the point there is that sort of 3 or 5% return may not sound much, but, you know, think what you're doing with that money in the bank or under the mattress at the moment. You know, not very much, which is why, you know, whatever the regulatory position within a housing sector is, you know, the rewards are still here, and I think, as you rightly say, Vanessa, you know, sometimes going back to basics like that is a timely reminder.
Well, I did indeed go back to basics with another well, the compounding thread was started by a Property Tribes member, but I actually wrote an article, 14 reasons why buy-to-let is still a good investment. And I wrote it really for newcomer landlords, because we have a lot of newcomers coming on and saying, I want to get started in buy-to-let, but I'm really not convinced that it's still viable, that the returns are still there. And when I was starting to write this article, I thought, oh, I'll maybe come up with 5 or 6 reasons, but in the end I came up with 14.
Yeah.
And it was a good exercise for me to go through it all again. And you know, I remember, Ben, when I started out in buy-to-let in 2004, I didn't even know what loan to value was or what an interest rate meant. And I think, you know, for those of us seasoned landlords that have been in the game for a long time, I think it's good for us to put ourselves back in the shoes of a newbie and understand that they need these kind of questions answered. And it's you know, there's no silly question if you were looking to learn and grow. And I think, again, you know, helping landlords new to the sector understand the benefits, you know, and also conversely, you know, you can help to understand the risks as well. I think that's a really, really positive thing for them. You know, what's your favourite thing or your favourite reason to invest in buy-to-let?
Well, why did I invest in the first place? I mean, it's a good question, actually. God, you got quite thought provoking today. So I guess I invested originally because I had some spare money, and I thought I had it sort of drummed into me from an early age. You know, get on the property ladder, bricks and mortar, or, you know, all of those sort of old-fashioned sayings. But you know what? I think there's a, you know, if you get the right sort of investment, it you know, it can work really, really well. And I bought one, it went up in value. I remortgaged. I bought another one, it went up in value. I, you know, remortgaged them both again, and I'm now in the process of paying them down. And you know, well, happy to share. I've got 8 properties, and I'm probably going to stick where I am for the moment, because this job takes up quite a lot of time, as I'm sure you can appreciate. But yeah, I mean, that's my little journey, and you know, at some point that's going to be a pension or an income, or yeah, I don't know what it's going to be. I haven't quite worked out my exit strategy yet, but that's how I start out, and I suspect that isn't too dissimilar to a lot of landlords, you know, on here, going through that sort of same thought process. The bit that I always say to landlords, though, Vanessa, is, you know, there is a certain ideology about owning a home or owning a buy-to-let, and I do think you still need to do your homework around the type of property that you're going into, the type of area that you're going into, and understanding what your target market is. But you also need to understand the fiscal environment, because actually, you know, as we've said before, and you know, it's my pet hate around taxation, but if you're on the cusp of the next tax band, and you're, you know, reasonably highly leveraged, you're not going to be able to offset all of your mortgage costs, and actually it could work out that you're paying for the privilege to have that property because of your individual circumstances and the lack of a way that you can offset your mortgage interest and finance costs. So to me, it's, you know, if you are thinking about investing for the first time, or even increasing your investment, it's okay, well, you know, you may well have the money for a deposit and know where you want to go, but actually, you know, if you're looking at having a revenue each month, if you're looking at capital appreciation, okay, well, maybe you've got, you know, a slightly different goal, but you need to understand that you might be actually, you know, paying for the privilege overall to have that property. So, you know, really doing your homework when it comes to the finances. Don't just think, yeah, this is coming in, this is going out, and, you know, and that's done. You know, remember, tax should be a 4-letter word. That's what I say.
Well, Ben, I can only agree with you. I think one thing that we can say in property is that numbers never lie. And, you know, if you crunch the numbers and you've used the correct numbers, you will be presented with a result that tells you whether a deal is going to be profitable or not. And it's, you know, as you alluded to, it's very specific to the individual's situation. But my feeling is always to focus on net cash flow month on month, because if you have that, you can stay in the game long enough to benefit from any capital growth, which is really just the icing on the cake, isn't it, when it comes to property. And with what we've got going on in the economic environment now, nobody can really say how much longer this very frothy house market is going to continue for, because it's kind of defying all expectations. And if we talked a year ago, Ben, and said we'd be in the middle of like an absolutely booming property market now, we wouldn't have believed it possible. So it's very, very rare for house prices to increase when there is economic uncertainty on the horizon. And, of course, Brexit's being pushed to the background as well because of COVID. So there's all these things rumbling along. And I think, landlords have got to be aware of threats. And this kind of leads me nicely to our next topic, because you and I often say, oh, we don't want to be negative, but
we always are.
Well, no, I was going to say, Ben, the truth isn't negative. It's just what is. And
Absolutely.
if there is a threat out there, and we're talking about it, it's not negative. It's actually positive, because if you know about the threat, you can take some steps to avoid it. And this is kind of moving across to our next trending topic, which is the rise of build to rent. And we've heard this week that John Lewis, the store, they've got stores all over the UK, they are now entering the build to rent market. And we heard previously that Lloyds Bank were entering the build to rent market as well. So here we have two very institutional, large scale players starting to turn some of their property holdings from things like car parks or offices over stores into build to rent accommodation. And there's some talk of them allowing pets and things like this. Now, this is going to increase the supply of rental accommodation in these areas where this is happening. And again, I think landlords looking to make acquisitions, that they need to know what these institutional investors are doing. In some ways, it can signal that there's a high demand in that area, but on the other hand, you need to make sure that they're not going to oversaturate the area.
No, I mean, I'm fairly ambivalent about build to rent, to be honest with you. And I tell you for why, Vanessa, is when I think build to rent, I think expensive. And I don't want to pour cold water over 10,000 homes being built and made available to rent. That's great. I mean, the fact of the matter is, it might hinder a local area, but I don't, 10,000, we're in desperate need of new affordable homes to buy and to rent, frankly. So I don't look at build to rent as a threat. Where in terms of it competing with maybe properties that I've got in the area, I think for the John Lewis perspective, do you want to live over a shop? Is going to be don't want to be too snooty about it, but there'll be some people that be put off by that, if knowing where John Lewis's tend to be sited. They're going to be a retail environment that may not appeal to everybody. So I'm personally not too worried about the build to rent sector. It's been around making lots of promises for a good few years now. It's something to be mindful of. I think there's stuff that we can learn from the build to rent sector. Things like pets. The build to rent sector actually really championed the idea of not having fees and big upfront payments and deposits and that sort of thing. I think we can learn from some of the they will say innovations. I think it's just a slightly different way of thinking, to be honest with you. I think if we can open our minds to some of the things that they do, but I personally am not worried about that sector expanding. I doubt we'll see I don't know what the time frame is for these homes, but I suspect I shall be greyer than I am today. In fact, I've got quite a lot of grey in my beard at the moment, but maybe a bit greyer up here. But a good 5 years time, I would suggest we won't see those homes. So yeah, these are sort of medium-term plans, but I really don't think landlords have too much to worry about from that. But they should learn that what those people are doing and how they're going about it, because they've got some interesting ideas.
Yeah, I agree with you. I guess that, as you say, they're not going to take up any slack for quite a few years yet. But it is interesting to see institutional money going into private sector accommodation. It does show that they have a belief that it's a good thing, a good place to put their money.
Absolutely.
They've had to change their strategy because of all the damage that COVID has done to the high street and so on. So we can maybe take a little nod of confidence that they're putting money into the sector. So in times ahead, one to watch.
Right, absolutely.
We'll move on to our next trending topic, and this one was another article that I wrote that got a lot of comments. And I said there's no need for landlords to panic if there is a house price correction. And again, I think newbies coming into the sector can be worried that they buy something and they end up in negative equity within a few months. And of course, that's something to be wary of. But for existing landlords who are probably leveraged well below 75% LTV and so on, a housing correction actually doesn't affect landlords unless they're over leveraged, or indeed they're not, if they're not selling anything, they're not going to crystallize any losses. So we hear these really spiky headlines in the media designed to drag us in, but again, we have to apply logic to it and say, actually, if there's a house price correction, it probably won't affect landlords, and there may even be some bargains to be had in the future.
Exactly right, Vanessa. I think whether or not there is to be a correction will frankly remain to be seen. As we discussed earlier, the markets are very, very buoyant. I think one of the topics is about landlords exiting the market later, but we are seeing new landlords acquire property. We're not seeing any real sign of it slowing down. I think what will be interesting is that at some point in time, that what's the base rate now? It's 0.1% or something. At some point in time, I would think that people are going to be looking at interest rates and starting to move things up. It will be interesting to see what impact that has on prices and appetite when it happens. But where one door closes, another one opens, and I think if you're in it for the long haul, then blips here and there, as long as you are in it for a little bit longer, you probably won't see a great deal of effect, I would have thought.
I think one of the things that's being sort of touted around is that inflation may rise. Again, this is so interesting, because normally when there's an economic downturn, we do see inflationary costs rising. But the Bank of England is very much saying that they've got it under control. And just this week, actually, we've seen quite a few lenders, buy-to-let lenders, reducing their rates again. And there's so many good competitive buy-to-let mortgage products out there. Ben, I don't know if you're the same, but I regard my buy-to-let mortgages as a commodity, and I really value having them because I've got some really good rates and whatnot. And when these rates are really low, it is a strong signal to dive in and secure. Maybe I would always go for a 5-year fixed rate now, not a 2-year fix, because this money is so cheap, literally.
No, and I bleated on about the tax changes earlier. One of the things in my own situation is that money is quite cheap at the moment. So you're actually not only are you offsetting less, you're obviously offsetting only a percentage of not very much as well. Money is dirt cheap at the moment, and like you, actually, I tend to fix over a 5-year period. We're not going to get unless something disastrous happens, we're not going to get lower interest rates. There's not much further to go. So some really good deals, and also banks showing confidence around the amount of loan to value as well, being slightly more generous on that. So I think that's an interesting sign as well. But you spoke about inflation and associated costs. Couple of stats for you. So in the year so far in 2021 up to the end of May, we've got 2.1% inflation based on CPI and 3.3% as measured by RPI. If you look at rents increasing over that period, rent increases are at 1.2%. So for those people that want rent controls or rent stabilization, be careful what you wish for, because rents are looking after themselves quite nicely. Thank you very much.
They are. Actually, it's interesting because we've got a topic on property tribes. It's not trending, but just related to what we're saying about tenant demographics post-COVID, and the sort of tenants you should be looking at to mitigate your risk. And I saw a programme on the BBC earlier this week. We need 60,000 lorry drivers in this country, and this is one of the things that is influencing inflation, is because goods can't be transported around the country efficiently because of this severe shortage of lorry drivers, and lorry drivers earn good money. So I think lorry driver will be a good tenant demographic going forward.
There you go.
And they're away a lot. So,
yeah, indeed, absolutely. Not so much wear and tear.
We have to think these things through carefully, don't we?
Quite right.
Anyway, I'm just looking at the time. We're coming to our last trending topic. You mentioned this earlier, Ben. There's been some, I would say maybe hype in the media saying that landlords are lining up for a buy-to-let exodus. Apparently, we've had enough of higher taxes and increased regulation. And apparently us older landlords are looking to exit a little bit earlier, and we're not being replaced by younger landlords. Now, didn't we warn Mr. George Osborne of this in 2015? And I don't even know if it's really happening. I mean, I suspect maybe some older landlords have just had a kind of the last straw that broke the camel's back with COVID, maybe looking to ship out early. But I think the general mood with landlords is keep your powder dry, keep your properties occupied, keep your tenants happy, and keep sailing forwards.
Yeah, I think that's right, Vanessa. Look, everyone's circumstances are different, and I can well understand that if you've been in the game for 20, 30 years, the environment now is very different to how it was back then. And if you don't like that environment, get out. Simple as that. What I would say is we did a piece of research earlier. When was it? In April, actually. Crikey. So a couple of months ago. Just over 1,000 landlords. 7% of respondents told us that they had invested in new properties, and the same amount had sold properties, so 7%. And I think what we are actually seeing is those, if you've been caught up in the eviction ban and you've got 20, 30, 40 grand's worth of rent arrears, I totally get why you would want to sell. But what we are seeing is actually almost the opposite to what that article is saying. Actually, we're seeing investors that understand the market that they're going to be operating in. They understand the regulatory backdrop. They understand some of the short-term issues that COVID has brought. And do you know what? They're still buying. And do you know why? It's because property is still a good investment, as we said at the outset. The rewards may not be what they once were, but they still represent an investment that, frankly, you're not going to get if the money is in the bank. You're not going to get the capital appreciation benefit. You're not going to get your residual monthly income. You won't have a pension at the end of it. So it's very much a case of individual circumstances. I know that there will be some landlords that are peed off with the environment, but there are others that are dealing with it. And I think, we want to make sure that we have an effective environment within which landlords can operate. Yes, there's some things I would like to see that don't exist at the moment, but we're working hard to make sure that the sector is a better place. But for some landlords, it may not be the right sort of investment for them to stay in, and there are other investments available, aren't there?
Well, there are, but I think we've seen during previous recessions and downturns that when these economic conditions occur, people do tend to turn towards bricks and mortar because it feels safe, it's something they know, and yeah, it's a tangible asset, and it becomes very popular during downtimes. And I think the other kind of positive indicator is that we're seeing, and that's being reported about in the media, is that we're seeing a lot of foreign investors looking to come into the UK. And I think what's interesting this time, Ben, is that they're not just focused on acquiring properties in London. They are actually looking to the big cities in the north, like Liverpool and Manchester. So the UK is still attracting a huge amount of inward investment from foreigners. And again, foreigners, the overseas investors are people that like to park their money somewhere safe, that's got a trusted legal system and so on. Yep. And the UK is never going to change in that respect. It's always going to be an appealing destination, isn't it?
Absolutely. And, that is another good nod towards the resilience of the housing market. There not only are people, yes, some people are exiting, but actually, people are investing, and, they are consolidating their investments. They're buying more. And it's attractive for, to other individuals from overseas. And I think, I spoke with the Housing Minister, Chris Pincher, yesterday, and he said exactly the same thing. What an incredibly resilient sector, and not just the fiscal side of it, but the people within it as well. We've spoken a number of times on this webinar, Vanessa, around property owners and landlords thinking about different ways of doing things and thinking about different types of investment. We have a really, really resilient and innovative sector, and that's attractive.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. It's lovely to hear the Housing Minister say that as well, because I think resilience is such an important thing in any economy or any sector. Okay, just looking at the time, I don't know if Maria can join us. I'm not sure if we've had any questions on the chat. Unfortunately, I seem to have lost my chat box, but I've got a little standby if we haven't.
Oh, here's Maria. Here's lovely Maria. Come to save us.
Yes, we have had some questions in, quite a lot of comments, which I'll share with you afterwards, but some good questions that have come in. So I'll start off with rental market in London will be very different from before, and some big employers are demanding staff to return to offices in central London. So, for example, some of the big four accountancy firms. So, is that going to affect London's rental market?
I think it's probably too early to tell, isn't it, Vanessa, as it stands at the moment. I think, obviously, those big employers will want probably people to come back to work. Frankly, whether or not colleagues will be ready to do that and jump on a tube and do all of those types of things remains to be seen. So I think that could have a positive impact. We know that London has suffered the worst in terms of falling rents, but I feel it's probably a little bit too early to tell. I don't know what you feel.
Well, I've got apartments in North and East London, and I have had one which previously has never ever been empty in 18 years. It was the very first apartment I bought. It's a one bed near Highbury in Islington. That has been void for 3 months.
Oh, wow.
And I've actually taken the opportunity to do a complete refurb on it because it did need it. But I've just relet it, and I've got a new tenant moving in on the 15th of July. Yes, 15th of July. And he works in the financial services industry. So, the thing about London, that will never ever change is that it has GMT, Greenwich Mean Time, and that means that it can be open when markets on both sides of the world are trading, and it's GMT that gives London its strength, because nobody's going to take GMT away from us. And the financial services hubs have a reason to be in London. So I agree with you, Ben. It's too early to say how badly the market has been impacted, but we do know that people love city living. They love access to the theatres, the culture, the coffee, the nightlife, and people are probably looking to go back to some degree of normality. I mean, speaking for myself, I've just been on a 3-night cruise just off the south coast, from Southampton to Dover and back. And you know, my husband and I, we were so desperate just to get some feeling of normality back. So I don't know whether that will drive people's intentions in the London rental market to get back into, you know, the buzz of the city. It's certainly interesting to see how it pans out over the next few months.
Agreed.
Okay.
Anything else?
So next question is regarding the National Landlord Register, and we've been asked if we think this will add a lot of cost to everyone.
I hope not. There's no justification for it to be costly. End of story.
Absolutely. This is one that you would like, Ben. Are any local authorities in England paying tenant COVID rent arrears?
Probably, and they should be, particularly those tenants who are in receipt of universal credit. They can make applications for discretionary housing payment where they're in arrears. But the discretionary housing payment is uniquely for those individuals. There may be one or two localized schemes away from benefits, that like hardship fund, where local authorities could pay. But this is the campaign that I was actually talking to Chris Pincher about yesterday. We know that there's a rent debt crisis out there. We've been shouting it from the rooftops for a long old time now. The rent debt that exists in the private rented sector is threefold what it was pre-pandemic. And what we also know is that the level of rent debt today in the social and mortgage arrears sector have reverted, are now back to pre-pandemic levels. So although local authorities can help those out on benefits, that's actually not where the problem is. The problem is with people not able to either claim benefits or simply having no additional help over and above furlough, etc., etc. So, you know, we saw Wales acquiesce to a small scale grant scheme. They scrapped their useless loan scheme and converted it to a grant scheme. I think there's 10-12 million pounds there. Not a huge amount of money, but better than a poke in the eye with a sharp stick. And the point I was making to Chris yesterday was, you know, why is England the poor relation here? What you got against England? Because there's stuff going on in Scotland and in Wales, and frankly, it's not always people on benefits that need that money. So I was pressing the case very, very hard. So a bit of a long-winded answer to that question, but yes, there are some, but they won't be paying it out to people that aren't on benefits for the most part.
Okay, and another question regarding the sort of the return to normal. Someone has asked, will foreign workers who left the UK during COVID be returning?
With difficulty, I think, in the short term. I don't know the answer to that question. I'll be honest with you. I think in the very, very short term, I suspect there aren't going to be people that are going from country to country moving unless they absolutely have to. So I think we need a bit more time to see what the medium-term impact of that is, not least because of all of the, you know, the quarantining and hotels that you have to go into and all of that sort of stuff. Hopefully that won't be with us for too much longer. And I think, you know, if everyone's been double jabbed, I think that's what the announcement was today. If you're double jabbed after the 19th of August or whatever, you don't need to be isolating and other things. It'd be interesting to see what impact that has on travel, because I think that will enable things to open up a little bit more. Should we take one more, Maria?
I was just going to say, Ben, I think there might be some kind of schemes to recruit key positions from overseas. You know, we mentioned lorry drivers, for instance. I know that prior to Brexit and COVID, that there were a lot of lorry drivers from Europe and other countries living in the UK that have subsequently left or gone home because of COVID. So I think there may be some initiatives by the government to encourage certain skills back into the UK, which would probably be a sensible thing to do if we're struggling.
Agreed. I also saw a few weeks ago that there was a university, I think, that was putting up students so that they could kind of isolate free of charge in order to, you know, to start the term on time and that sort of thing. Given how lucrative the overseas market is to the student accommodation sector.
Yeah, we'll see lots of creative things, I think, and people innovating to get over these issues, which again could be one of the kind of positive outcomes of what's happened over the past 14-15 months or so. Well, we got time for one more.
Go on then.
Okay, one here about the build to rent market. So are the build to letters going to be able to be held to the same standards as small landlords?
Yeah, well, I think so. You know, and it's one of the bits that I nodded to in the 168 laws report. I don't actually think there should be any degree of disparity when it comes to sort of safety and compliance, whether you rent in the social sector or the private rented sector or build to rent, frankly. So you know, they obviously well, I'm guessing that, you know, that they won't have the same sort of financial struggles that the individual landlord has, but everything else ought to be to the same high standard. And, you know, the association will be making sure that there is a level playing field in that regard.
I think it's interesting, you know, that some of the things that they're innovating with, is that the right word?
Innovating.
Innovating, that's it. Thank you. Senior moment right there. You know, that as we alluded to earlier, Ben, there are things that, you know, private landlords can learn from. You know, allowing pets. We've discussed this at length. We won't go into it now, but you know, some of the things that they're doing within the build to rent sector are quite interesting. And I think one of you know, the things that they're doing is trying to raise standards, certainly in terms of the accommodation and the fixtures and fittings and so on. So that's no bad thing. But then they're charging premium rents, and as we all know, in any rental market, you've got a range of rents to suit different pockets. So I think it's interesting times ahead. And on that note, I see we're out of time. So all that remains for me to say is to thank Maria for joining us with the questions. Also, Ben, as ever, lovely to have your input on this call, and thank you for collaborating with Property Tribes in this format. I always enjoy our chats and I always learn something. So I hope everybody else has found it an interesting hour out of their day just to chew on that landlord cud, as we like to do. So when are we back again? Do we know?
I think we're back in September, when we can show everyone our tans, hopefully.
Excellent. Yeah. Okay, there's so much going on over the summer, isn't there? We've got all the Euro football and the tennis and all the sporting events and everything. So we wish everybody a very, very happy and safe summer, and hope that you can all return to some kind of normality, and we'll be back in September with the next edition of the Landlord Lens. But until then, it's goodbye from everybody on this call, and happy summer holes, and we'll see you back here with our tans in September.